Alright, so here's a big one. Robert Kiyosaki and Harry Dent warn that financial Armageddon is imminent. Financial experts Harry Dent and Robert Kiyosaki, the man who predicted that a great crash was coming in 2016 all the way back in 2002, are both warning that financial Armageddon is imminent. Submitted by Michael Snyder. Financial experts Robert Kiyosaki and Harry Dent are both warning that the next major economic crash is in our very near future. Dent is projecting that the Dow will fall to 5,500 to 6,000 by late 2017. And Kiyosaki originally predicted that a great crash was coming in 2016 all the way back in 2002. Of course, we don't exactly have to wait for things to get bad. The truth is that things are not really very good at the moment by any stretch of the imagination. Approximately 1/3 of all Americans don't make enough money to even cover the basic necessities. 23% of adults in their prime working years are not employed, and corporate debt defaults have exploded to the highest level that we have seen since the last financial crisis. But if Kiyosaki and Dent are correct, economic conditions in this country will soon get much, much worse than this. During a recent interview, Harry Dent really went out on a limb by staking his entire reputation on a prediction that we would experience the biggest global bubble burst in history within the next 4 years. There will be, and I will stake my entire reputation on this, we are going to see the biggest global bubble burst in history in the next 4 years. That was a quote by Harry Dent. There's only one way out of this bubble, and that is for it to burst. All this stuff is going to reset back to where it should be without all this endless debt, endless printed money, stimulus, and zero interest rate policy. And of course, he's far from alone. Without a doubt, we are currently in the terminal phases of the greatest financial bubble the world has ever seen, and it is exceedingly difficult to see any way that it will not end very badly. Ultimately, Dent believes that we could see U.S. stocks lose 2/3 of their value by late next year. The Dow I'm projecting, quote, Harry Dent, the Dow I'm projecting will hit 5,500 to 6,000 by late 2017, just in the next year and a half or so, end quote. That'll be most of the damage. Then it will rally, and then there'll be some aftershocks into 2020. My 4 cycles point down into early 2020, and then they start one after the other to turn up. I think the worst will be over by 2020, but the worst of that will be by the end of 2017. If that does happen, it will have far worse. If that does happen, it will be a far worse crash than what we experienced back in 2008, and the economic consequences will be absolutely terrifying. Another highly respected financial expert that is making similar claims is Robert Kiyosaki. My wife is a big fan of his books, and I have always held him in high regard. But what I didn't realize is that he had actually predicted that there would be a major financial crash all the way back in 2002. 14 years ago, the author of a series of popular personal finance books predicted that 2016 would bring about the worst market crash in history, damaging the financial dreams of millions of baby boomers just as they started to depend on that money to fund retirement. Broader U.S. stock markets are recovering from the worst 10-day start to a year on record, but Kiyosaki, who made that 2016 forecast in the 2002 book Rich Dad's Prophecy says the meltdown is underway and there's little investors can do but buy gold or silver and hope the Federal Reserve slows the slide. I agree with Kiyosaki in that the one way investors can shield their wealth is by getting into gold and silver. In a recent article, I explain exactly why I believe that silver in particular is ridiculously undervalued right now. I believe that myself. I think silver is the most undervalued asset in the world. I think once silver takes off, silver is going to the moon. This 80 to 1 silver to gold ratio is just nonsense. I think we're going to get more closer to 15 or 10 to 1 silver to gold ratio. So if that tells you anything about where the numbers are going to be, yeah, numbers could get really crazy. Numbers you can't even fathom right now per ounce, like uh, over $1,000 per ounce for an ounce of silver. Kiyosaki also believes that the coming crash could be delayed a bit if the Federal Reserve decided to embark on another round of QE. But even if that happens, Kiyosaki is absolutely convinced that eventually it's all going to come down. Kiyosaki told MarketWatch that the combination of demographics and global economic weakness makes the next crash inevitable. But the Fed could stave it off with another round of QE, which might stimulate the economy. The Fed turned more dovish at its March meeting, with the central bank penciling in fewer interest rate hikes this year than were previously part of its implied framework. The Fed signals those hikes would happen more slowly than had been anticipated earlier, owing to a weak global economic environment and a volatile stock market. The big question, whether we do QE4, said Kiyosaki, if we do, the stock market will come roaring back, but it's not rocket science. If we stop printing money, it crashes. If we print money, it goes up. But eventually it's all going to come down. Another voice that I've come to respect deeply is Jim Rickards. He's not quite as apolitical as Kiyosaki or Dent, but without a doubt, he's deeply concerned about where the global economy is headed. Global growth is slowing both because of weakness in developed economies like Europe and Japan, and weakness in some of the emerging market champions such as China, Brazil, and Russia. The limits of monetary policy have been reached. The evidence is now clear that negative interest rates don't stimulate spending. They are only good for devaluation in the ongoing currency wars. World trade is shrinking, a rare phenomenon usually associated with recession or depression. And he's exactly right. The economic downturn that we are witnessing is truly global in scope. Brazil has plunged into an economic depression. The Italian banking system is in the process of completely melting down, and Japan has implemented negative interest rates in a desperate attempt to keep their Ponzi scheme going, but it really isn't working. In fact, Japanese industrial production just crashed by the most that we've seen since the tsunami of 2011. Also, a note on that Japanese negative interest rate policy, one of the biggest sellers in Japan right now are home safes, because people don't want to put their money in the bank and get a cut taken out of it. So they're taking their money out of the banks, buying a safe, and keeping it at home. Smart folks. Here in the United States, investors are generally feeling pretty good right now because stocks have rebounded substantially in recent weeks. However, Rickards is warning that this rebound is very temporary. Stocks are clearly in a bubble. The stock market is ignoring the strong dollar, which in turn hurts exports and devalues overseas earnings. It, it is also ignoring declining corporate earnings, imminent defaults in the energy sector, and declining global growth in general. Never mind, as long as money is cheap and leverage is plentiful, there's no reason not to bid up stock prices and wait for the greater fool to bid them up some more. There's so much that we could learn from all three men. Sadly, just like we saw in 2008, most Americans are ignoring the warnings. We're not, are we? The mainstream media has conditioned the public to trust them, and right now the mainstream media is insisting that everything is going to be just fine. Still, with everything can be so will everything be just fine as the months roll along? Only thing we can do is wait and find out. Hope you got your precious metals, guys. Precious metals, stored food, water, and a gun to protect your family. Other than that, that's all you need. So, if you don't have those four things, start working really hard on getting them, because that's what you're going to need. Keep stacking, guys.